Okay, so we're going to cover go-to-market and tokenomics. A lot of people are generally curious about tokenomics, but sort of a precursor to that is the go-to-market and how you plan that. Before I start, I'll say there's no wrong way to approach this. This is more about providing some guardrails. Sometimes it's helpful to just move faster if you have some sort of formula and guardrails within to think about. Otherwise, we've seen people just do experiments and do crazy things, and they end up working. So sometimes it's an art and it's super organic. Sometimes it's very well planned and formulaic. And I'll try to tell some stories about some of the projects that we launched early on and how they went through those different paths and how they worked. And so, the first thing to think about is, you want to engage in any initiative in the company. And so how do you measure success? How do you know if something is working or not working? It's better to have a binary measure of that than to have some, a fluffy idea of that. We'll talk a little bit about, what the core KPI is. What is the number one number that we're driving towards with all of the company's efforts as you're going through token launch? And then, how do you grow that? So what is the formula for growing that? And then how does that manifest into tokenomics and community incentives? This tokenomics stuff, you could say it's a little bit like make or break. We're starting to see projects redo their tokenomics and stuff like that. So it is worth putting in the upfront effort into figuring out how everything's divvied up. One way I heard someone explain it recently was there's things that you can undo and there's things you can't undo. And tokenomics is one of those things you can't undo. And so it's worth putting a little bit more efforts up front and thinking about it and doing some planning, analysis, because it will prevent sort of issues later on. And, maybe I'll sprinkle in some additional lessons and lessons learned, etc. Okay, so how do you set your North Star? What is the number one KPI that matters? Easy answer. So that's going to be token holders at launch. And so a lot of what you want to do with your go-to-market is just continue to grow your community, continue to grow all your community numbers. The reason is when you get to a high number of token holders at launch, that sort of determines the liveliness of the community. It determines how much liquidity can it get onto market. And it's a good measure of how decentralized the network is. And I think the number one thing Bitcoin has taught us and teaches us every year is that decentralization is the most important thing. So how many users are out there? How resilient is it against the market out there, et cetera? And so the more token holders, the better. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to grow that number as big as possible. And I think, another thing about token holders at launch is these are good metrics to show investors when you're going downstream and so from where you are today. And so if you do have a lot of token holders, then it's definitely a talking point that you can, or a lot of engaged addresses, for example. It's a talking point that you can bring up as you're pitching investors. How do we increase this number? It's just, giving people things to do, giving the community things to engage in and to play around with. And as of, I would say, the end of the last bull market, we started to see this become a trained user behavior out there. There are active, very large groups out there that just go after these different quests or these different things that they can do on chain because they think they'll get an airdrop later. So you may have heard of points programs that are out there or quests. That's sort of a industry that's forming around this concept of giving people things to do on chain for a reward. And when giving a community things to do, the best thing that you can give them to do is sort of like real world use cases of how to use your application. So if you have like a loan application, it's like, what are the 3 activities that people are going to use this application for? Adding liquidity, taking out a loan, paying back the loan. And so if the things that the community has to do are real world things that you expect people to do in the future, that's better. And then, you definitely want to track usage and metrics. So the more data and metrics you have available, the more you can sort of inform yourself about what's working and what's not working. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can get metrics in the most scrappy way, or you can use formal tools that are out there. As long as you have some sort of measure to know whether the effort you're putting in is driving that core KPI, then you'll be sort of on the right track. And then if you've ever worked with sort of like a marketing or a PR firm, they really like to build sort of a drumbeat like cadence of news that they're putting out there. And the reason is that it's sort of it's good to remind people that you're there. It's good to remind people that you're a brand out there that's doing something, that you have a product. And a lot of us sort of get into different products because we're just seeing them over and over again. At some point, we're like, hey, I should probably try that out. I should check it out. Maybe I even just research it if I'm not a target user. But if you can create sort of a series of activities that people are doing on chain, that's the best thing. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what an announcement calendar around that looks like, that is measurable and sort of helps you build sort of a feedback loop. And when it comes to community building, everything that you're doing is under your control. And there's going to be things that work, things that don't work. At the end of the day, as I mentioned, you just want to raise as much awareness about your project as possible. And so announcing things and giving people things to do is one way to raise that awareness. And then, back to our number 1 KPI, if your community size is growing, that's how you know things are working. So you might want to look at, this space is kind of crazy. So you might want to look at number of users added per hour. You might want to look at number of users added per day. You might want to look at it on a weekly basis. But that's something to track so you know what's working and not working. Because a lot of times we just put a lot of effort out there because we're inspired to do different things. We're entrepreneurs, we're creative, and we can make things happen. But it's very important to know, which of those efforts are actually manifesting into increasing our core KPI, and which ones are sort of, perhaps less successful. They make it look like there's activity, but they're not necessarily growing, our number 1 KPI. And I'll go through this section, then I'll pause in case I'll take, 1 or 2 questions. And so it's important to look at all of this like a funnel. So I think a lot of this like a sales funnel. So, at your top of funnel, the beginning of your funnel, you have the total number of users that you have exposure to. And you're going to have different stages that you want them to track through. So if you're doing, marketing on a weekly basis or a daily basis, and you want users to get from point A to point B, you're going to want to track whether they're converting through these stages. So if we have some sort of like on-chain activity that we want people to do, one thing we might track is how many total users are in our Discord and what percentage are actually doing this activity. Internally, we came up with an acronym, the do the thing metric. And so, how many people do the thing when you tell them to? That might be one way to measure, community engagement when you sort of market or put something out there that you want people to do. And it could be that you look at this funnel in stages. And so if your ultimate endpoint is you want people to invest, then one thing you might be tracking in terms of your funnel is how many total users, how many are converting to registration, and then how many convert into a sale. This might be different for your use case, but it's good to know how do you want people to flow through your socials and into your application. And you're going to want to know what are the conversion rates. If your conversion rates are really low, you're going to want to talk to people, figure out, hey, what's not working, what's working, because you'll want to increase that conversion rate to increase conversion at the end of the funnel. And we're all engineers here, or we're very close to the engineering side. And so, we like to make things methodical. And so thinking about it with these frameworks